Thank you so much for coming out. This has been a rough week at Columbia. As you know, it's very good to be in community with you all today, coming together to talk about literature, something that we love, talk about art, talk about translation, fiction writing, beautiful international books with my favorite author, who I'm so excited is here with us today. I'm thinking, as I introduce this event, of the members of the Columbia University who cannot be with us today because of the attacks of the Trump administration on our university. I'm thinking of Mahmoud Khalil, who is still in detention in Louisiana. I'm thinking of Yunseo Chung, who is having to hide from ICE right now, even though a judge has ordered that she may not be deported because there's no reason to. I'm thinking of Ranjani Srinivasan, who left for Canada rather than risk arrest. I'm thinking of them also. Members of our community. I wanted to say their names in this space. But here we are. We are still a university. We are going to hold our community together the best we can. And we are gathered for some lovely, lovely conversation today. So I'm not going to introduce Yoko Tawada, someone else is, but before I do, I would like to thank those who helped us to bring her here. So you are guests of the School of the Arts tonight. I'm co-hosting this event with my colleague Rivka Galchen, who is a fiction writer in the School of the Arts writing program. I myself run the translation program. We are helped in putting together this event by the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, the Donald Keynes Center of Japanese Culture, the Society of Fellows Heyman Center for the Humanities. New Directions has partnered with us, and Book Culture is selling beautiful, beautiful books over in the corner there, books by Yoko Tawada and Rivka Galchen, and I hope you will have a look after the event. To introduce our honored guest tonight, we have our student, Tracy Shi, who is a second-year poetry student in the program. I'm very glad that she agreed to do the introduction. So welcome, everybody, and come on, Tracy.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It is my great pleasure to introduce Yoko Tawada tonight. Tawada was born and raised in Tokyo, Japan, and she currently resides in Berlin, Germany. She is an eminent author of fiction and poetry, as well as a translator. She produces works in both German and Japanese. Tawada is recognized as one of the most extraordinary multilingual writers in contemporary literature, having authored a multitude of distinguished works, including Where Europe Begins, The Bridegroom Was a Dog, The Naked Eye, Memoir of a Polar Bear, The Emissary, Scattered All Over the Earth, and Paul Celan and the Trans-Tibetan Angel, among others. Throughout her career, she has been the recipient of numerous awards, including the Akutagawa Prize, the Tanizaki Prize, the Noma Literary Prize, the Izumi Kyoka Prize for Literature, the Gunzo Prize for New Writers, the Goethe Medal, the Kleist Prize, and the National Book Award. My initial encounter with Tawada's work was during a translation seminar led by Susan Bernofsky, who translates her works from German into English. Tawada, having moved to a foreign land at a relatively young age, often explores the experiences of characters estranged from their native linguistic and cultural roots. I find Tawada's writing incredibly interesting and moving. Instead of focusing solely on the confusion or distress linked to the transition and displacement, she emphasizes on a courageous form of freedom and the pure joy of language. In one of my favorite novels of hers, The Naked Eye, the protagonist is an unnamed Vietnamese high school girl who is abducted and taken to West Germany. Following her escape onto a train that accidentally takes her to Paris, her journey commences as she becomes increasingly enchanted by the films of Catherine Deneuve, despite being unable to understand the language. Immersed in cinema that surpasses her linguistic comprehension, she gradually blurs the distinction between her reality and what she perceives as reality. Tawada's works present an anti-Babel concept, the notion that linguistic and cultural differences should not and cannot be the confinements constraining one's thoughts. She writes for an understanding that transcends the cultural and national boundaries. In Tawada's world, reality is fluid, while language functions as a lens that shapes individuals' perception of that reality in a way I found profoundly human. Tawada is like a botanist of language, replanting and rerouting words in new context. She considers the historical significance of etymology and plays with it, animating it in delightful ways. And she allows language to exist in its own authentic form, unbound from the constraints of time or rigid definitions that might cause it to stagnate. In Tawada's works, nouns, verbs, living beings, and inanimate objects are all respected equally. Language becomes like living water, with each molecule floating and colliding, giving rise to ever-changing vitality. We are all fortunate to have the opportunity to glimpse into her world tonight. Let us all welcome Yoko Tawada. Thank you so much.
Good evening, and Susan, thank you for inviting me, and Rivka, nice to see you again. Today I want to begin with talking about 3 translation projects that I participated in the time of pandemic. I didn't travel much like now, and I stayed home, and of course I wrote my novels, but also I translated, and I want to talk about my translation experience a little bit and have discussion with 2 of them. Yeah? The first project was translating some poems from Kokin-Wakashu into German. The Kokin-Wakashu is an anthology of poems, Japanese anthology of poems 1,000 years ago. And the poems of tanka, not the haiku, but tanka is a little bit longer than haiku. Haiku has 17 syllables, and the tanka, how many? 31, yeah. And as you know, Japanese language is very far away from German language. And in this case, also the language of tanka is 1,000 years far away from the modern Japanese. So it's very far away. And the question is, if the translation more difficult if the language is far away or the near together. Yeah? And I think it is not more difficult. The question is it easier to translate Dutch poems into German than Japanese poems into German? And I think it's not more easier or difficult, but it's a quite different process of it. If 2 languages are very far away, you must take apart the language once and rebuild it. It's like the technique of montage, and it reminds me the technique of surrealism, for example, that you take all the text apart and put it together again by yourself. And another idea is if the one language is here and the other language is here, there is a big in-between space, and you must have the third language, imaginary language that does not exist, but you cannot put one Japanese word directly into one German word, so you are staying a while on the third imaginary language, that is your own language that does not exist. It's something like, it's similar to writing poems, because when I write poems, I have the feeling that there is one language that does not exist, and I try to leave my usual language, go to that imaginary language, and translate it into the language of poem. It's one poem in the Kokin Wakashu, and it's about how far away the language. You see the blue English and German are very near, and there are a group of Romance languages and Slavic languages, and beyond the Finnish and Hungarian language, there are big white space, and beyond the white space, there's Japanese somewhere there. And this is one example from Kokin Wakashu, one poem. I read it in Japanese. 雪のうちに春は木にけり、うぐいすの凍れる涙、今や特乱。And my German translation. Inmitten der Schneezeit ist der Frühling gekommen. Würde die gefrorenen Tränen der Nachtigall zum Schmelzen bringen. And I found the English translation from the 1985 by Ellen Crane McLaw. Springtime has arrived. While fallen snow lingers on, now at long last the weepler's frozen teardrops will surely be dissolving. And there is one topic that I don't want to discuss with you today, that is translating the name of birds. It's very complicated topic, so don't ask me about that, but Nachtigall, nightingale, and so. And the one good thing about German language is that you must write nouns with the first letter of nouns by a capital letter, so that, and it look like in Japanese we mix the Chinese characters and Japanese phonetic letters, and that Chinese characters look like German words written by capital letters. So the snow, spring, and bird, and the tears, it look like it's of course a coincidence, but in the German translation, these words look like bigger, more complicated than phonetic letters. And I think that in the translation, sometimes it's not about the transfer, but correspondence between the original text and the translation. So you translate one text, and the original and the translation begin to correspondence to communicate without my attention. Yeah. And another thing is a visual similarity between the original and the translation, because in this case, the Chinese characters and the big capital letters. And I came to the idea of visual similarity or visual surface of translation when I read one poem by Paul Celan. There is a poem, Neige. It looked like this. And in German, it means slope. Well, there is a word like Neigung, it's affinity. But in the poem, he writes about snow. But this word, if you translate and pronounce it as a French word, it's neige, it's snow. So the option, visual face of the poem is the same, N-E-I-G-E, but the meaning and the word and pronunciation are too different. And in this poem, somebody is riding through the landscape of snow maybe to the other for whom this word means snow. Bei Wein und Verlorenheit, bei beider Neige, ich ritt durch den Schnee. Hörst du? Ich ritt Gott in die Ferne, die Nähe er sang. Es war unser letzter Ritt über die Menschenhüllen. Sie drückten sich, wenn sie uns über sich hörten. Sie schrieben, sie logen unser Gewirr, in eine ihrer bewilderten Sprache. Yes. The next example is 雪のうちに春秋にけり、うぐいすの凍れる涙今や特乱。It was not the next example, but the same poem. But what I want to talk about is about the verb and the auxiliary verb. Because kuru means come, and kinikeri means come, and keri makes from the word something like the emotional. It puts the admiration to the verb. Well, toku is melt, and tokuran makes the verb, puts the imaginary character to the verb. And in Japanese, the verb came always at the very end of the sentence. It's very important for the structure of the poems. And in English, maybe you cannot put the word the end of the sentence, isn't it? Or do you think there is a case that you can, the verb is at the end of the sentence? No.
Like just in German.
You know, and just in German. And in German, especially the long sentences, very often have the verb at the end of the on the end of the sentences. And I was very curious about how you can you translate very long German sentences, such like the sentences by Thomas Mann, into English. And I know that Susan Bernofsky is now translating the Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann into English, right? And
You want me to cry on stage?
and I asked her to share with us her translation of the very first sentence of the prologue of the Magic Mountain. It looked like this. And someone like to read it loudly for us? Yes, please.
Vorsatz. Die Geschichte eines Kastors, die wir erzählen wollen, nicht um seinen Willen, denn der Leser wird einen einfachen, auch ansprechenden jungen Mann kennenlernen, sondern um der Geschichte willen, die uns nun gerade erzählt werden scheint, wobei zu Hans Kastors Gunsten immer erinnert werden sollte, dass es eine Geschichte ist und dass nicht jedem die Geschichte passiert. Diese Geschichte ist ja lange her, dass sie es sozusagen im ganzen historischen Lebens überzogen, im unbedingten Zeitraum der tiefsten Vergangenheit vorzutragen.
Thank you. And now, Susan, please read your translation.
Is this on yet? Yes. The story of Hans Castorp that we mean to tell, not for his own sake, for the reader will find him to be a simple, albeit appealing young fellow, but for the sake of the story which strikes us as eminently worth telling, while it must also be emphasized, as we wish to do Hans Castorp justice, that the story is his, and that not every story can happen to just anyone. This is a story from a bygone era. It's practically dripping with historical verdigris, as it were, and must without fail be presented in the verb tense connoting the deepest past.
Wow, thank you. Yeah. I don't have the feeling that the long sentences are especially difficult to translate. Then it sounds very natural. And
look at all the parentheses. You know, he really broke up this one. It's a lot of little sentences in between. I don't know. He made this one easier, but a lot of his are not. Thank you for picking a kind one to assign to me. I appreciate it.
Okay. And when I write my own poems or novels, to me, the adjectives are very, very important, and I forget the importance of the verbs. But I know that I must always think about verbs because, especially in German, they are more important because the movement is in the verbs. And is there water? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Slowly.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit about 4 seasons as a topic of the literature, because I was not interested in the weather and 4 seasons in my writing, but in Kokin Wakashu, it's a big topic, and I think nowadays the 4 seasons or the weather is a very political, very important topic. I thought that people lived 1,000 years ago lived more with nature than today. But in the case of Kokin Wakashu, the most of poets are noblemen, and they didn't have direct contact with nature, so they were worse than the people today in New York City or in Tokyo. They stayed inside, and they had their own imagination of four seasons, and they write about four seasons when their expectation of weather does not match to the reality. So she writes middle in the winter, the spring come, or it is warm, it is winter and it is warm, or it is not hot but it is summer, or it is snowing and it is spring and it is snowing. So she saw the white flowers in the snows and makes a metaphor from the non-reality. And we will maybe say it's climate changing, right? We often talk about weather, and we recognize that the winter is not like winter that we want to have. And we say it's a climate changing. But also in the Middle Age, the inside calendar was not the same, like the calendar outside or reality outside. And it was one moment of the very poetic moment that your image of fall season does not fit to the reality. The gap between the expectation and what you see. And so the weather or four seasons are not very not an important topic like I thought. I found two sentences about the weather. The first one is from the Deutsche Bundesbahn, German Railways from 1966. Alle reden vom Wetter, wir nicht. Everyone is talking about the weather, but not me, because it's a railway. That's train. And the second one is by Mark Twain. Everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. And so maybe the weather is symbol of something unimportant, but always talked about, or weather is a symbol of what human cannot dominate or control. And it can be very political. And why the landscape in spring or landscape in winter can be a very political topic. I want to talk a little bit what Kim Si-jong said. He's a Korean-Japanese poet, and in his generation, he as a child, he was forced to learn Japanese in the Korean school, and after that he moved to Japan and he became the Japanese writing poet. And he said that the so-called very Japanese natural landscape is a reproduction of the image of nationalism, the home ground. The nationalism needs always the landscape that you have in you. and he's very critical about poems, about weathers, landscapes, nature, and so on, because they are not natural. And Rivka, and is a weather or 4 seasons. Are they interesting topic for you for writing? Or never?
I think so. I've never thought.
Do you have a microphone? Yeah.
I don't write about cherry blossoms, but
No,
I am interested in the weather. Yeah.
Yeah? And why?
I don't know, but I was thinking about the way that in your fiction, I often feel like when I'm reading a description of reality, whether it's the weather or a doctor's office or what the handle of a door is like, for me, the way I experience it is almost like you're untranslating it. Like I kind of know a door, and I kind of know a doctor's office, and then when I read it from you, it's in a foreign language, but I mean the object is in a foreign language. And I was wondering if that's part of your practice or just the way that you move through the world, that sort of, it's just, everyone defamiliarizes a little bit, but in your work I feel like it's ongoing.
Okay.
That's my revenge for asking me a question.
Yeah? Yeah. Do you want to say something?
That was a question, I think, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think?
I think a memoir of a polar bear was the first book. When I wrote it, the snow and the winter became a big topic to me. It was not before that. And it was but not my plan, but it occurred to me, it happened to me, and it became automatically like the, important point of writing that book. And I was in dialogue with that snow or winter. What does it mean? And it's also a political book, but I couldn't write about socialism without snow. So it's very connected in a funny way. Yeah.
That book is very much set in Europe. Why did you write that book in Japanese?
Yes, I wanted to write maybe a book about the Cold War, and the Cold War was something that even when I lived in Japan, a very important question for me, and it is very connected to Europe or the east part of Europe, and I didn't think about Japan during I wrote that book. But also the naked eye is not in Japan, no Japanese story. I wanted to write about communism and colonialism and Confucianism, and I thought to write about these three themes. Japan is not the best country for it, but Vietnam. So it is the protagonist comes from Vietnam and not from Japan. And maybe that's why Japan disappeared in me and in the new trilogy. That there is no Japan anymore. Yeah.
What do people say in Japan about this?
No, I don't know. No, I don't know. I mean, my Japan become more and more not the Japan in now in reality, but this kind of Japan in the old poems, in the language, the history of Japanese language. I read many Japanese books and also old books and Japanese books, and to me, the history of Japanese language become more reality than the real Japan today.
And you talked about, when you were talking about the distance of the languages in Japan being sort of far off in the white, you talked about the technique, almost like a surrealist technique when the languages are far away,
yes,
that you put two things that are not obviously connected in any way, and you wait for something to pop up between them. Could you describe that a little bit in terms of the emissary? Because there's a new language that pops up in the emissary, sort of private language that the character has to resort to because no one can speak Japanese with her. And I was wondering if that technique of almost like pursuing the dissimilarity so that something unexpected pops up.
Yes. I think the Panska is a better example for it, because Panska is Pan-Scandinavian language is in my book the scattered all over the earth and then suggested in the stars. It's a language made by Hiruko, the protagonist, because she is living in Scandinavia, but she cannot stay in one of the Scandinavian countries. She must move always. So she mixes the Scandinavian languages, Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian, and create her own language that is understandable for all Scandinavian people, but it is not correct. It's and that is because she cannot live in one of that languages, but in between, in vacuum, and the new language must come up from that vacuum space to survive, and to communicate. It is necessary that she create, but it's not created like the Esperanto, because Esperanto is really created in the lab, and it's a plan. It's a science. But in her case, the language, that new language, just spring out from that vacuum where she lived.
Scandinavia needed that language.
Yeah.
They just didn't know it till she got there. Yeah.
You talked about different parts of kind of correspondence when you do a translation, and then you read one of the poems in Japanese and German and English, and it kind of went from a K. The Japanese version sounded dominated by K, and the German was dominated by N, heavily dominated by N, and then the English translation was heavily dominated by an L sound. And I was wondering if the sound of it is important to you, or if that's natural because those languages are you're just following the language as you're doing the translation. If the sound is part of, I mean, obviously it's part of it, but how deep is that for you when you're doing a translation?
The sound was very important. In my German translation of Kokinwa Kashu, it must, I can't describe what kind of sound it should be, but I have the image of the sound that, and and read it loudly many times. So, and yes, the sound is very important. But the problem is, one problem is, it sounds like the translation of Kokin Wakashu, you know? I don't know how to explain, because maybe I cannot talk today about other project, but in my translation of Dante, for example, it sounds like Dante translation. And there are so many, there are tradition of Dante translations. There are more than 100 German translations of Dante, including part translations, and there is something like the tradition of the sound. And I wanted to create a new sound of Dante translation, but it's almost impossible. There is a so big tradition of that. It's a one word, you know, of Dante translation, and I couldn't do anything against it, and so it sounds like Dante translation. I don't know. I wanted to ask Susan, did you read other Thomas Mann English translation of Thomas Mann?
Well, there's two published translations, and I read part of them before, and they're both really, really good and very different from each other. One by Helen Lowe Porter from 1928, and one by John E. Woods, who used to be your neighbor in Berlin. He died 2 years ago, unfortunately, from 1995. And both of them are really beautiful translations, but they're very different from each other and also very different from what I'm trying to do. It's like there's so much room for making a new text every time you translate something.
Yeah, and the sound of the translation, how it's.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's difficult to say. I mean, the earlier translation, the Helen Lowe Porter, is very much it feels more like a 19th century kind of writing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, this is a really good and hard question to answer. I know that they feel very much of their time, and I think that one feels denser in a sense. Like the language, the vocabulary is more sort of intentionally high literary. And I think John Woods' translation was trying to, on purpose, make it more accessible. So it doesn't feel quite as dense.
Okay. Because I've heard that, for example, Hermann Hesse, his German is so old-fashioned that young German people cannot read it. But the translation, the English translation or Japanese translation comes new translation with a modern language. So young people like it.
Have you done one yet?
Yeah.
Have you translated one
No,
yet?
before they did it.
Okay.
Friend.
I did a Siddhartha.
So I had
fun.
So I thought the original can become old-fashioned, but in the form of translation, they can renew themselves and survival.
I was curious if some of the poems you were translating are they witty or funny or sly? And the reason I was asking is because I feel like your work is almost always quite impish and kind of. I'm just saying, when there's a polar bear shopping for frozen salmon in a grocery store, for me, that's a very Tawada moment. And I was wondering, that seems like a live translation problem, or maybe one of the most famous ones. Like it's hard to move that humor.
Yeah, I was afraid to put too much Tawada moment into the translation. So that's why I didn't translate many texts. I translated Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, like you, Susan, because I thought it's okay to put Tawada moment into Kafka's text. but Thomas Mann, I don't know. And in Kokin Wakashu, I didn't want to, I cannot, it's so old, it's so far away from me, so I really wanted to forget that Tawada moment, and it's also without humor, but one moment is very Tawada, that is a word play. It was common in that time, and very normal at that time. So maybe the word play, yes, and the short form. I discovered for me the short, very, very short form through the translation. I had never written haiku or something like that before I translated Kokin Wakashu's tanka, but after that I got the idea to write haiku in German, and I wrote some, and you translated it into English. So maybe it is discovering some opportunity in me, possibility, what can be also my style that I don't know. Yeah, it's yeah.
And your haiku were all very urban.
Yeah.
Very city haiku.
Yes. Yeah.
Because maybe to get away from the nationalism of landscape.
No, my haiku, I mean, the haiku cannot be very nationalist because it's too short to be nationalist. But in tanka, that 14 syllables more, that makes nationalism. Yeah?
And in Thomas Mann, he talks about music being dangerous because music can produce nationalism.
Okay.
National music.
Interesting. Yes.
By the way, audience, we'll talk up here for another maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then that you will have the possibility to ask questions at microphones at the sides. It won't. Your job here is not just to listen. You may also speak.
And I think I cannot talk about three of project today, but the second one is a very short. I talk about it. The Dante translation is from Italian language into German. It's a group project, and there are many German poets that take place. Some of them are very, some of them, yeah?
It's like a who's who.
Yes, and
German
it's
literature.
that project is like translation project, but also the atlas of the contemporary German writing poems at the first time, because at the same time. And many voices in Dante is realized by many voices of contemporary writers. And to me, some of them cannot speak English, Italian like me. So it's that project is translating from the language that I cannot speak into the language that is not mine. And I find each word, I look for each word in the dictionary, and it's also the montage, and tried to make montage from that word, but it was very difficult, and I read some Japanese and some German translation of Dante, and searching the meaning of the sentence between these translations are so different, or each of them are so different that I thought, what is written in the original? Yeah? I was so surprised that each translation says something else. So it was like the where can you find the meaning of that sentence? And I heard, And the third project was translating contemporary Japanese poets into German. Also with many poets, German-speaking poets, but most of them cannot speak Japanese. So the people of Japanese studies, and also I prepared the rough translation for them, and they not remake, but they made the final translation from that material. But Elena Yanulis translated in the traditional way. She can speak Japanese and she translated in German. It is a normal way of translation that somebody can understand the language and translate alone. But most of them, the team, the duo of the translators, one can understand the original language, the other makes the translation. And I myself translated the Japanese poem by Jeffrey Angus. He is American. He's American, but writing poems in Japanese. Like me, who is writing German, and my mother tongue is Japanese, but I'm writing in German. So I wanted to translate his poems to create, what I don't know, because I want to talk about it with Susan too, because is it difficult to translate the text by the author whose language is mother language? How do you call that kind of authors whose mother tongue is not that language? You know.
Mm-hmm. Yes and no. You know, the difficult thing is that the energy of the language might not appear strongly enough in the translation. So the difficult thing is to keep the energy of that author alive in the translated language. But this is a problem that you could have regardless of, you know, what the first language of the author is. So I don't think it makes it more difficult. It's just it's a characteristic of the writing, among other characteristics. And all the characteristics bring their pleasures and challenges. I mean, the weird thing about translating your writing is not that German is not your first language, it's that you're a weird writer and your writing is weird. But that's also what makes it, you know, delightful and rewarding.
And I have also a question on you, because it has something to do with that question, but maybe not. You wrote in your book, Little Labors, most of the great women writers of the 20th century who write or wrote in English were and are writing from England or from the English Commonwealth, not as much from America. What does it mean?
I think it was a descriptive thing, but the reason it was on my mind, which is somewhat relevant, is that I thought like the cozy mystery was the first kind of book that lots of people were comfortable reading it, even if it was by a woman. Like it was sort of, I sort of feel like, just even a great writer who didn't write, I like all the writers, whether they write mystery or not, but even a great writer like Muriel Spark, who doesn't write mysteries, it was her book, Memento Mori, which was essentially a mystery where, people were getting knocked off basically by death and old age and illness, but they were still getting knocked off all the time. That was sort of her, in a sense, her launch book for me. I mean, I feel like it was the book that she made it in. So I sort of felt it was because Americans weren't writing mysteries. So I felt like, and I feel like that was a little transition.
Okay.
But I mean, I do think it's more like a point. Like I was curious, when you're writing fiction and you're not translating it from some other text, what are you translating it from? Like I feel like you're still kind of translating it from something, maybe from a perceptual outlook or an experience, or, I mean, are you translating it from something even when you're writing fiction?
Yes,
your own fiction.
Yes. Because translating is a very intensive way of reading. So you are always reader as a writer. And without reading, no writing. And I really enjoy translating. Translating is very slow reading and go into the world of and you don't remind the reader, but you go into the soul of the author deeply. And when you write fiction, maybe you are the only one who wants it. This book is written because you want to write it. But if you translate a text, there are at least one person who wants to read it. That you, as a reader, and in the project, there are many people who wanted to read the translation. Also, the Japanese anthology, there are people who said, we want to read the contemporary Japanese poem, but we can't read Japanese, so please translate. And so you have your readers before you. It's at the beginning. It is activity of communication. It is and dialogue. But if you write your fiction, or if I write my fiction, you are very alone at the beginning. Nobody wants it. Only you want to write it. Yeah.
I'm thinking that there's so many of your stories that are about transformation in some way, animal or just people changing. And does this obsession with transformation have to do with your literary loves, the writers you love? Does it have anything to do with, being exophonic as a writer? Does it have anything to do with translation for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the moment of transformation is, for me, the moment of understanding something. When I'm just a human being and I'm not changing into an animal, I can't understand what it means to be a human being. And I move from Japanese language to German language. At that moment, I can observe the Japanese language from outside. I understand something. But if you always stay only in your mother tongue, you cannot see your mother tongue. That's why the moment of metamorphosis, is so important for my writing and thinking. I saw your translation of Metamorphosis in the Strand bookstore.
I'm just so,
I'm
I'm so sad that I can't read yours. And now I want to go learn Japanese so I can read your translation of Metamorphosis. I mean,
Yeah.
were there things about the story that that seemed very Tawada to you? Or are they Tawada now after you translated it?
Yes, and no, yeah, it's a good question. When I translated Metamorphosis, the first thing that I did is to think about the word ungehoya. That's a word that is not easy to translate. So, and I read that means. How did you translate?
I
the word?
translated that as monstrous because in English we're lucky in that the word monstrous in English can mean like very large as well as grotesque, like a monster truck, is a very large truck, for example.
And I found the meaning that ungehoya means the animal that is not pure, so you cannot sacrifice it.
Oh, Ungeziefer.
Ungeziefer.
Yeah.
Not ungehoya, but Ungeziefer.
Okay, Ungeziefer.
Yeah.
Okay. So wait, what? So
I thought, okay, it's interesting because Gregor Samsa is also, so he must sacrifice himself for the parents who had children, and but he does not want to do it. He does not want to sacrifice himself, his life. That's why when he changed into a not pure animal, Ungeziefer, he does not.
He couldn't. The question went away. He couldn't be sacrificed.
Yeah. But anyway, the Ungeziefer is so. I thought I can't translate it, so I write just Ungeziefer in the phonetic letters in Japanese. I didn't translate it, and it remains in the text like a very foreign element of the text.
That's a very Tawada thing to do.
Yeah. And that's a moment I thought, okay, in my fiction, I could also keep maybe some words very foreign or very ununderstandable, like Fremdkörper.
Foreign bodies.
Yeah. And not translating everything for the audience or for reader, but they just remain like the insects that's very foreign in text. And that's one idea that I got.
Foreign insect is good. I wish I had done foreign insect now. No, I don't. That would have been bad. But, wow, this is neat.
Yeah.
What did you do? Did you have trouble with the in seinem Bett in the first sentence? There's that extra phrase. Fand sich in seinem Bett zu einem ungeheuren Ungeziefer verwandelt.
Yeah, yes.
It was like, why does Kafka say in his bed? Like it's like a joke. Mm-hmm. Where else would he be? Maybe it's not a problem in Japanese. In English, it's a problem because there are two prepositional phrases that are both in or into, and you can't have two. I mean, it's just so ugly to have two prepositional phrases with the same preposition kind of randomly in the same sentence. So it's a problem in English, but maybe not in Japanese.
No. But I don't really remember what I did. Yeah.
I need to read your translation.
Do you want to open it up to questions?
We should open to questions.
Yeah.
So are there
Okay.
microphones somewhere?
You and Rivka share.
So there's a circulating mic. Hey, when you speak, when you ask your question, please Hey, hi, Yifan. Speak slowly and keep it short. Thank you.
Try to keep it short. Nice to see you. My question is, you mentioned in your book, you often switch languages. You write in both Japanese and German. And quotation, you have to start from scratch with switching languages. It's frustrating, but I do it intentionally. I don't want to become too accustomed to any one language or take it for granted. Literature often requires beginning from zero. That's the end of the quotation. Can you explain a little bit more like what it means to start from zero? Each time you switch languages, what do you feel in your writing progress?
Ein Wort habe ich nicht verstanden.
Was bedeutet das von vorne, von null an?
Yes. Yes. Yes, and in writing fictions or poems, I really want to go back to the point zero always. That means, any language become to you very easy or normal when you use that language every day. But this kind of comfortable way to use language, or maybe you begin to use language like a tool that you can use very easily. And but if you write poems, you must stop using language as a tool. But you must look into the face of the language and ask, is it possible to say anything in one language, or what does it mean to write? Well, what can the language do? Or such questions, because you can, of course you can write maybe about everything if you are very good in the language, but it's not poems, or it's not a fiction to me. That point zero, that the language is impossible, or the language is, nothing about the language. Yeah, it's very important to me to go back that point each time, yeah, with each poem, yeah. Thank you.
I had a quick question about your use of gender, like being like multilingual and doing your translations. Like im Deutsch gibt es drei Geschlechter, aber im Französisch gibt es zwei. Do you think a lot about like the translations, like different genders when you can translate between like Japanese and in German? Even when you think in your day-to-day life, do you gender objects? Is that something you're thinking a lot about in your writing and your day-to-day life?
Mit Gender zwischen den Sprachen,
ja.
Auch weil Deutsch, also die das hat,
ja.
Und ob das eine Rolle spielt, also fürs Schreiben auf Japanisch auch.
Ja.
Vielleicht auch was Menschen betrifft, weiß ich nicht.
Yes. The gender in the German grammar is a complicated question. At one side, they had nothing to do with if it is really female or a male, but the other hand, when I write in German, it is some object. I don't want that they are female, so I must look for other words. You know, the door, for example, the door is female, it's okay. But das Fenster, the neutral, yeah, it's also okay. Yeah. Yes, but sometimes it's not okay. So yes, I must search for other words. And in Japanese, there are nothing like that, but there are other problems.
What's the right gender for the window?
There is no gender for window in Japanese.
But if you could pick the gender.
If I could, yeah, it's also female for me. Yeah, yes, yes.
I just want you to expand on the last topic you guys were talking about the not translating every single word, especially when there is a difficult meaning attached to the word in the original language. Surely there is linguistic gap between different languages, of course. But I do wonder how you balance that, because if you just introduce a new loan word, that can be thought of as lazy. But I just wonder if you include any footnotes for your readers, or do you kind of hand off that baton to your reader to figure out the meaning of the word and the different associations that are attached to it?
Wenn du ein Wort in der Fremdsprache lässt und nicht übersetzt, sie will mehr darüber wissen, machst du eine Fußnote oder hilfst du dem Leser?
Yes, I love footnotes because for especially the old poems like the poems from Kokinwa Kashu, there are so interesting informations that not only to help the reader, but it's also poems for me. I couldn't talk about one poem today, but it is about the bowl that you use for the ceremony to pray for the rain, and you cannot understand it if you just read the poem, but the description about it is, when as a reader, it's interesting, so I wrote many comments to the poems in this case. And there are people who believe that the poems do not need any comment. That's also true, but to me, if it's like present for reader, not help, but present, it's okay. Yeah. Do you read footnote for Thomas Mann translation? Mm-hmm. No. Okay. So people can understand everything that. No.
Yeah, I think some misunderstand, some difficulty, I think is okay.
Yes, it's interesting. Yeah.
Should we I think we have 5 minutes, so we'll do maybe 2 more questions.
Good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Tawada-san. Thank you for sharing your current translation project. And I'm from China, so I have questions relating to Chinese culture and Chinese elements in your novel, such as the flying soul, to tamashi, and also the kentoshi. You play a lot with just the forms of Chinese characters. So I was wondering how you consider incorporating the Chinese elements or dealing with the kanji Chinese characters in your writing. I think your writing is also a translation process. So my question is, how you deal with the kanji and also different kind of forms of language in your writing? Thank you.
Wo es schon schon so viele Kanji gibt, also ist da, wenn du die Kanji einbaust, ist das auch die Übersetzung und wie gehst du damit um? Also ob die dann irgendwie ausstechen und ob das literarisch bedeutend ist.
Ah, yeah. Yes, in my own writing, it is very important if I use for one word kanji or phonetic, because but it's very difficult to explain when I choose a kanji and when I choose phonetic letters. That means that for the Japanese poems, also contemporary poems, the visual image of the poem is also as important as the phonetic or sound of the poems. That is not really the case for German poems. You know, the German poems you can write in one way or maybe some other ways, but it sounds always the same, and you cannot write one word in several ways. And kanji the Chinese characters can be, it's case by case. Sometimes it looks very abstract, sometimes it look more like picture. It's you must write one book about it. It's very big question. Yes, but thank you. Yeah.
Last question. What's the mine?
Thank you. So you said when you were talking about the Dante translation, you're translating into a language that isn't mine. Thinking back to when you started learning German, how did you learn to play in a language that isn't yours? And also, how did you learn to play in a language that is yours?
Wie hast du spielen gelernt in einer neuen Sprache und in der eigenen Sprache?
Spielen?
Spielen gelernt.
Ah.
Also schreiben, spielen.
Ah, okay. I think for children it's very natural thing to play with language, and also to learn language it's better to play than not to play. So it is the best way to learn language, to make the language to something yours, you know. And when I moved to Germany, I got my second childhood and began to play again to learn German language. It was not my plan, it was not my attention, but it happened to me that I began to play again like a child. It was sometimes a little bit funny to play as an adult, but still the learning foreign language is playing with languages to me.
Well, I like ending on childhood and play. And so thank you so much for sharing this time with us. Thank you, Susan, for making everything happen. Thank you to the audience for being interested in language. And yeah.
Thank you.
What? And Yoko will be here to sign
Yes,
books.
okay.
Well, actually in the back table. That's where she's going to be at the back table.